1783. Official end of the American Revolution as the United States and Britain signed the Treaty of Paris. Under the treaty, Britain recognizes the independence of its 13 breakaway colonies. 2004. A 3-day hostage siege at a school in southern Russia ends in bloody chaos. Chechen militants who seized the school in Beslan set off bombs, while Russian commandos stormed the building. More than 330 people, most of them children, are killed in the carnage. 1976. Viking 2, the unmanned American space probe, lands on Mars. The NASA craft takes the first close-up color photos of the red planet's surface. And 1970.
I want to say this, that it's a great game. It's a game of great lessons.
In Washington, NFL Hall of Fame coach Vince Lombardi dies of cancer. Lombardi, who led the Green Bay Packers to win the first 2 Super Bowls, was 57 years old. Today in history, September 3rd. Camille Bohannon, The Associated Press.
Yoga, I think, and some of these mantras you say definitely have Buddhist and sometimes demonic origins.
This one is unflippin' believable.
Really?
These babies have been born with something that affects more people than malaria, cancer, or even HIV and AIDS. Because of it, many of them will be denied an education and condemned to a life of poverty. Thousands of them will be killed. Millions more will be victimized and abused. Because all these babies have one thing in common. They're female.
Hi, I'm Bev Randalls, chairman of the Missouri Club for Growth. If you're like most people, you've had enough of wasted tax dollars and inefficient government. It's no surprise independent polling consistently finds that Americans believe at least half of our federal tax dollars are wasted every year. Here in Missouri, our state legislature is working to cut waste and grow our economy by passing the first major tax reform in nearly 100 years. This tax reform will benefit all Missourians by creating new jobs and letting us keep more of our hard-earned money to spend as we see fit. Put simply, tax reform means economic growth, and growth means more money and more opportunities for more Missouri families. If you agree, we need your help. Visit growmissouri.com today to tell our elected officials, stop wasting our tax dollars and start focusing on jobs and the economy. That's growmissouri.com.
Paid for by Missouri Club for Growth PAC.
Who can turn the world on with her smile? Who can take a nothing day and suddenly make it all seem worthwhile? Well, it's you, girl, and you should know it. With each glance and every little movement you show it. Love is all around, no need to waste it. You can never tell why don't you take it? You're gonna make it after all. You're gonna make it after all.
Meow. There we go. There we are, the Mary Tyler Moore Show theme, one of my favorite shows of all time at WJN, not to be confused with WGN, which is a real TV and radio station in Chicago. Well, let's see, coming up in a few minutes, we'll have news from the CBS World News Desk, as well as market information from American Public Radio right around the corner. In the meantime, here's a recap of Friday's closing numbers, because the stock market was closed yesterday in New York City. Get the rope, boys. Stocks closed slightly lower Friday, ending the worst month for the market in more than a year. Dow Jones Industrial average fell 30 points, closing at 14,810. The broader S&P, or the Standard & Poor's 500 index, did a little bit better, ending Friday by dropping just 5 points, closing at 1,632. The NASDAQ Composite fell 30 points, closing at 3,589. The market's reaction to speeches from Secretary of State John Kerry and President Barack Obama about Syria was muted. Traders also digested a report from the U.S. Commerce Department that showed Americans' income and spending barely rose in July 2013. The S&P 500 fell 3.1% in August, its biggest decline since May of 2012, when it fell 6.3%. However, the index is up 15% for the year. And that's a brief recap of Friday's closing market information. And now let's switch things over to the American Public Radio for today's morning report.
Microsoft is paying more than $7 billion for a cell phone maker that used to be cool.
Marketplace Morning Report is produced in association with the University of Southern California.
From APM in New York, I'm David Brancaccio with the global perspective on business and economics. Cell phone maker Nokia of Finland and tech giant Microsoft used to be co-workers who collaborated on smartphones using Windows software, but that relationship has blossomed into a full union. Microsoft will pay $7.2 billion to buy the handset business of a company that was once the Apple iPhone or Samsung Galaxy of its time. Nokia stock is right now up 38% in Helsinki. The BBC's Mark Gregory has been following this.
By Microsoft actually having direct control of Nokia, it has more ability to push the company in the direction that it wants. You also have to remember that Microsoft has been reorganizing itself. Actually buying Nokia, as opposed to having just a partnership deal with it, is part of this tidying up exercise, I suppose, which Microsoft hopes will mean it's a much more streamlined business and much more able to make the bold strategic decisions it needs to really compete with the likes of Apple and Google.
Now, Nokia is a very important brand within Finland, and apparently there's some mixed givings. In fact, some people are in mourning that a Finnish asset is going over to Redmond, Washington.
Well, yeah, this is a pretty emotional moment for Finland. You have to remember that just 10 years ago, this company was worth more than $100 billion. It's now only worth about $11 billion. But most people in Finland can remember the day when Nokia was a national trophy, and it also accounted for more than half of the Finnish stock market. So the fact that it's now lost its independence will be something of a big moment. There will also be, of course, some relief, because many in Finland were worried that the decline was now so strong that eventually Nokia might disappear. The fact that it's now under the umbrella of Microsoft, which although it has strategic problems, is obviously a very profitable, strong company, at least gives the remnant of Nokia some chance of survival.
Among other things, Mark Gregory covers technology for the BBC. Mark, thank you.
Thank you.
Microsoft is paying $2.2 billion to license Nokia patents. Florian Mueller, a German tech analyst, says this is about Microsoft using the look and feel of Nokia's work and less about the underlying software.
This is the opposite of the Google-Motorola deal. Google, 2 years ago, bought Motorola for $12.5 billion because it owned hardly any patents. In Microsoft's case, they've got an incredibly strong portfolio that almost every Android device maker has already licensed from them and is paying for. So they didn't really need to beef up their own patent holdings. What they were interested in is securing access to Nokia's innovations for the long haul.
There's also some Kremlinology going on here. Along with everything else, Microsoft will put back on its payroll Nokia's CEO, Stephen Elop. He used to work at Microsoft and is said to be a man with strong leadership vision. That's interesting because Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer has just said he's phasing himself out over the next year. Now let's do the numbers. Stock index futures for the United States are up sharply this morning after a big rally in Europe and Asia on our Monday holiday, but the FT 100 index in London right now is down 0.1%. Time Warner and the CBS network are now putting away the hammers and tongs and have wrapped up their ugly negotiation over how much the cable operator should pay for TV and digital programming. It was a deal fought while standing on the necks of their own customers. More than 3 million cable customers in New York, LA, and Dallas were unable to get CBS shows for a month.
Looking for a good read? Visit the Big Book blog at marketplace.org. Listen to author interviews and read excerpts from the Marketplace bookshelf. Online at marketplace.org/thebigbook.
It's always so infuriating with the job search, right? You send out reams of resumes and sometimes you get back nothing. In recent months, a group of unemployed workers in France have been working on a new tactic to put themselves in front of potential employers. Christopher Worth reports from Marseille.
Finding a job in Marseille is really tough. At 14%, the jobless rate here is much higher than France's national average. But on a busy street near the city's business district, Diamandra Fontaine unfurls a large 6-foot by 3-foot poster of herself. And she and her friends paste it on the side of a boarded-up building.
Here is my photo with what I want to work.
Fontaine is an unemployed HR officer, and in big block letters, the poster gives her name, a phone number, and her work qualifications.
We hang it so the persons come out the subway and see it.
The hope is the right person, maybe from a nearby company, sees Fontaine's picture and hires her. We step back and take a look.
How do you feel about your face being on the street?
I like me there. I like it. That's why I do it.
Fontaine is part of a group called CV Street that's plastered Marseille with posters of her and other workers. Josh Fatoussi, the project's co-director, says the larger goal is to show that unemployment isn't just a statistical problem. It's a human one.
We have people that need to find a job, and they have the posters hanging out in the streets so people can actually see who they are.
Like poster hanger Dennis Mayroy. He's a gardener who lost his job 4 years ago.
This is better than a written resume, because when you send a resume, you have no idea what happens to it. But this is very public. Maybe someone will see the number and call.
The posters do attract attention. Dominique Fanny passed by and stopped to talk to Diamandra Fontaine as she hung another poster.
I think it's really interesting because you actually see a face. You see a smile. I hope she finds work.
The project's organizers claim 2 people have found jobs so far. Not a lot, but it's much better than sitting at home. And they want to roll the idea out to other cities across Europe. In Marseille, France, I'm Christopher Worth for Marketplace.
And I like to say that technology now is like rock and roll in the 60s, the cutting edge of society and culture, for better or for worse. That said, it's not always about tech. The consumer products company Jarden is paying $1.75 billion for scented candles. Jarden's adding Yankee Candle to a roster that includes crock pots, Rawlings baseball stuff, and little Sunbeam appliances. In New York, I'm David Brancaccio with the Marketplace Morning Report. From APM, American Public Media.
President Obama pressures Congress,
making the case for action on Syria.
Microsoft makes a deal.
A signature event in our transformation.
San Francisco's Bay Bridge reopens to traffic. Good morning. I'm Steve Kathan with the CBS World News Roundup. President Obama deploys the power of persuasion today. He's out to convince members of Congress that the U.S. should take limited military action in Syria after accusing the Assad regime of using chemical weapons. We begin with White House correspondent Peter Mayer. Peter?
And Steve, the president meets here soon with key members of congressional, military, and foreign policy committees. Senate Foreign Relations Chairman Robert Menendez told CBS this morning he's worried about inaction on Syria.
It sends a message to terrorist groups to seek access to chemical weapons because the world will largely stand by when you use them.
Following his own meeting with the president, Senator John McCain said concrete action is needed to support rebel forces and chase Syrian dictator Assad from power.
The only way he's going to leave is if he thinks he's losing.
Now the president will lose an opportunity for FaceTime with Congress starting tonight when he takes off on a 4-day trip to Sweden and Russia.
I'm Vicki Barker. If General Jack Keane is correct, then Senator McCain and his fellow hawk Lindsey Graham have heard assurances that Assad will indeed be sent that strong message. Keane is a former vice chief of staff of the U.S. Army who's spoken with both senators. He says President Obama assured them any strikes against the Syrian regime would be far-reaching and deep.
He's going to deter and degrade, and the important word is degrade,
significant military capability of Assad's regime.
General Jack Keane. I'm Vicki Barker reporting live. Now over to CBS's Elizabeth Palmer, the only U.S. network correspondent in Damascus.
President Bashar al-Assad has given his first major interview since President Obama decided to seek congressional approval for strikes against Syria. In it, he said that the world has failed to produce the slightest proof